that you're using the Q&A Zoom functionality and not the chat functionality. Q&A will make sure that other people can see not only your question, but also the answer in case they have the same question. What I want to cover today is I'm going to first start with all of the new inbox enhancements that you're going to be able to see and use once you download the MixMax extension. And then the latter half of the webinar will really be focused more on going into MixMax, the dashboard itself, and configuring some of our features. So stuff like our meeting templates or those evergreen calendar links. We'll also go over our templates or how to create saved portions of text, sequences, and if we have time, I'll hopefully also be able to cover some of our reporting functionality, as well as our rules and workflow automation. And please let me know, obviously I'm working from home like a lot of folks still are, so please don't hesitate to let us know if something feels buggy or my audio goes out, anything like that. All right, and the last option here, last thing I want to mention is that we do have a demo account here in CS. So like I said, my name is Jane. The demo account we use is Mary Keller. So if you see that name around, just know it's our demo. So first and foremost, for those of you who maybe haven't downloaded the extension yet, and maybe just want to get some more information before joining, we are a Chrome extension. So of course, make sure that you're using Chrome as your browser. And once you do that, a good rule of thumb, just to make sure that MixMax is still actively up and running in your account, and we're able to do stuff like add those tracking pixels, is you should see these two brightly lit M's over here at the top right-hand corner of your inbox. This larger M is going to take you into the web app, which again, we're going to focus on that a little bit later. And this smaller M that's located within your Gmail side panel and is available to users, I believe, on Starter and above, is going to be what opens up what we call the MixMax sidebar. And depending on what plan you have, you'll see different options here, but we'll cover that as we go through your inbox functionality today. Now in this list view, if you're new to MixMax, you should notice some new icons that appear. The first is this lightning bolt or tracking indicator within MixMax. And this should appear for any of your outgoing messages that you add a tracking pixel to. If it's grayed out, it just means that, hey, there's no activity on this yet. But if you see it colored in and there's a little number next to it that indicates the level of activity, this means that there has been some engagement on this message. And this does work for multiple recipients. You can see here, I only have that one. But as I hover over my tracking indicators, it'll tell me who opened it and then also at what time. If we move over here into that sidebar, you'll see the same tracking indicator. And if I select that tab in my sidebar, it actually opens up what we call the live feed. And I really like to think of the live feed as sort of like a ticker or a byline that you might see like on Bloomberg or something like that, because it tells you in real time as your clients are engaging with your messages. And so even if, you know, Grace Hopper, if I sent her this message 4 months ago or something like that, because it was open today at 6:35 a.m., it's actually going to appear here at the top of my live feed. And there are some filtering options that I really like to use here. I actually just kind of live with this sidebar open to my live feed as I go throughout my day. But I like to filter by opens because I don't particularly care about seeing just my sent messages there. And you'll notice now that the only thing that I'm able to see here are messages with some sort of activity on them. And what's super handy from this view as well is if I select that message, so again, let's say I sent this to Grace 4 months ago and it's popping back in my inbox, I don't want to search through all of my sent folders to find it. I can select it from that list view. It'll take me to the thread in my inbox. And here I can hover over that message and now I get even more granular detail, right? So I can see where Grace was when she opened it, on what device, and even what browser. And so if you notice that, hey, maybe someone opened this on their phone, that could be a good indication that now's the right time just to pick up the phone and call them. Now to the left of your live feed over here, and also to the left of your tracking indicators in your inbox list view, you should see this little chat bubble. This is a MixMax side chat, and it's how you're able to collaborate with your coworkers on particular threads and have conversations without having to go to an external chat app like Slack. Now, if you see it grayed out, that means that, hey, at one point there were messages here, but you're all up to date. If you see it sort of blank, like you see here, that just means there are no conversations being had. And then you'll notice for any messages that you haven't answered yet, you do get this nice brightly lit side chat notification, as well as a number to indicate how many messages were there. So if I select that message directly in my list view, or if I do it from this sidebar as well, it'll take me directly to the thread, and I can have conversations with my coworkers here. And even though we use Slack here internally at MixMax, and it's a great tool obviously for collaboration, I really prefer to use side chat in those situations where I maybe want to bring in my boss for a very specific thread. Not only are we able to have a conversation specifically about this email, but my boss can also follow along as what we call a collaborator. And it essentially means that they'll be able to see the entire conversation. They can even jump in if necessary without me having to actually add them as a recipient. And this shouldn't affect your tracking, and obviously your client won't be able to see the conversation that you're having with your coworkers here. But if you do want to add someone as a collaborator, you can do it in a couple ways. Here in the side chat, I could just go ahead and search for them by email address. I can also add them using this add collaborators icon at the top, which looks like 3 people. Or if it's from the list view, you can hover over your messages and also add collaborators that way. And yeah, actually, I do see an answer about the tracking, or a question about tracking pixels. By default, when you join MixMax, we do have read receipts or open tracking turned on, so that should be added automatically. But you can toggle your default tracking settings in the web app so that you can either turn it off or have different defaults. Like maybe you always want open tracking on as well as quick tracking or something like that. But I'll show you how to toggle it on a one-off basis in just a second here. And the last thing you'll see in this list view that I want to point out is our reminders functionality. And that's just this little alarm clock icon here. I use reminders all of the time. I think they're super handy when it comes to staying on top of client communications. And they're really similar to Gmail's built-in snooze functionality, where we let you archive a message until a due date that you specify. Why I really like reminders over snooze is that you can get really, really granular with your time. You can add notes about your reminders. So especially as people are starting to vacation after we've all been stuck inside for forever, a lot of people are taking time off, right? And so I like to set reminders for any out of office messages. It'll pop back in my inbox whenever that person is back in town, and I can quickly reach out to them. You can also add conditional logic. So I only want to be, reminded of something maybe if I don't get a response from the client first. You can also set it up regardless, but to spare my my inbox, I usually do with no reply. We'll do it for maybe like next week, let's say at 10 a.m. my time. And then, back from out of office, follow up with client. Set my reminder. It's going to archive. And then whenever it pops back in, you'll notice that it has this little reminded tag. And any sort of notes that you've added to that reminder will appear right here. All right, so let's go ahead and open up this compose window. And for those of you who are new to MixMax, you should notice right away that there are a couple of new features here. So right underneath your subject line and at the top of this compose window, there's of course this toolbar right here. And you should already see 2 similar icons. So of course you can add collaborators here. So if this is a net new thread that you're starting with a client and you just know for sure you want a team member on it, maybe it's an escalated issue, maybe it's a transition from sales or from like SDR to your AE, sales to CS, and you want to add the CSM here, you can do it in your outgoing messages as well. Oops. And of course, we have a reminders option here. I actually don't use reminders as often for any incoming messages or received messages, but I use it so frequently for my outgoing messages that, and this is done in your settings as well, I actually have an automatic reminder set up for all of my outgoing messages. But if you just want to set up a one-time reminder, of course, just click this icon here. You can add a note if necessary. And let's say I want to see this if there's no reply. And again, I usually do mine at 10 a.m. I'll go ahead and set that reminder. And you'll notice now that just below the toolbar, any enhancements or future automation I add to a thread will appear right here at the top of Compose. Now going to the left side of this toolbar here, you'll see this meetings button. And I love MixMax calendaring. We actually have a lot of different enhancements and options for you to use. And I believe most of them are actually available on like our free and starter plans as well. The first option that you'll see when you select meetings in this dropdown is something called share availability. And share availability is really, really handy if you ever are meeting with someone who maybe says like, hey, can you send me some times for the rest of your week? Or if you're meeting with someone who, you know, in the past has been notoriously hard to get a hold of. Because what this does is it actually displays times that you can meet in a tile view directly in the Compose window. And once your recipient selects a time, it'll automatically book that meeting for you. And so it really cuts down right on that like back and forth calendar dance that we can get stuck in. I should point out too that if you are lazy like me and you don't want to click around or use your mouse, these enhancements are available by using the command /, and then you can start to type to filter. So I'll do / availability to launch that functionality. Now, once I hit enter, you'll notice that it does pull up essentially my Google Calendar and all of my appointments. You can set all of these things in your calendar settings in MixMax. So you can change your default length. I usually use 30 minutes, but you can absolutely change it on a one-off basis. And what's great about this view is I can also easily pull in my coworkers' calendars. So if I'm trying to book a meeting with myself and Grace Hopper, or even if I'm booking on behalf of them, I'm able to do all of that directly from this modal, and I can make sure that, of course, Grace is actually available. By default, we do also prevent double booking. So, of course, if you do have any busy appointments already on your calendar, we're not going to display that for the client. All the way to the left-hand side here, a lot of this is very typical of any Google invitation where you can set a title. So maybe this is just a discovery call. MixMax. We do have a direct integration with Zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and enable that here. And of course, once the client books time, Zoom does that magic on the back end to update your event details. I usually let guests modify events so that they can add like a conference room or something like that if necessary, but a lot of people will turn this off. You can change the time zone that it's displayed in. So maybe I've got some clients in New York. You can add additional guests just like any normal invitation. And now you can also add what we call custom fields, which will just ask the client for additional information prior to booking. So maybe, you know, like tech is tech, although Zoom is very reliable. Best number to reach you as a backup. And let's make that an optional field. And that way they don't have to give me their phone number if they're uncomfortable. I should point out too here before I get out of the screen that you can overlap times. So if I wanted to show someone, hey, we can do 12:30 to 1, 12:45 to 1:15, that kind of thing, you can overlap your tiles. And once I select insert times, you'll notice that this really slick tile view is just in here in this Compose window. You'll notice, of course, that this is MixMax branded. We do have custom branding set up here. But if you are on Growth or Enterprise, you can set up your own branding so that all of our enhancements, including calendaring, will be specific to you and your company. Now, I don't actually use availability as much as some of our other features like our evergreen calendar links. And that's usually because I'm meeting with lots of teams and trying to figure out a date is kind of tricky. And these are also not dynamic. So availability, because it's in the body of a Compose window in an email, similar to like how you can't watch YouTube videos in emails, this isn't dynamic, and so it won't update. So once Friday passes, if this person didn't book time, they obviously can't go back in time and book with you. So I will often use our calendar links. And if you're creating one for the first time, they're actually called meeting templates within our web app. And you can create as many as you want to. You can also use meeting or calendar links to book across like multiple calendars, create round robin events, that kind of thing. But once I select it from that drop down, you can see all of my different calendars here. I'll go ahead and throw in that discovery call, and it'll automatically add this URL. You can obviously change this. So, if you want to say book time here, you can change the text. And this is roughly what your rolling calendar will look like. Again, this is MixMax branding. So if you do have branding, yours will look different. And for those of you who aren't on growth or enterprise, we'll have more generic branding. It won't be very MixMax heavy. And I like this because obviously it's very up to date. And actually from the recipient's view, it's super handy because they can actually see, we'll highlight any cells that not only you have available as the sender, but that they also have available to meet. And that way they're not having to go back into their calendar and just confirm that they're available. And what I like to do with all of my meeting template links, because this is obviously much easier to miss than availability, is I will actually use one of our enhancements called the call to action button to create obviously a button in this compose window that makes it easy to find. And so I found that just using /, you can also use this little M coin here to open up your enhancements. I'll type button and launch that modal. Schedule time to chat, add in the URL. Maybe we want to change the color to make it stand out a little bit more. Let's do fuchsia, why not? And now I've got this really nice, easy to recognize button in my email for the client. I use this when I have particularly wordy emails or something like that. And the last enhancement I want to show you guys when it comes to calendaring is something called / meeting. And this is actually not in the meetings dropdown, but what this allows you to do is pull in settings from a pre-existing meeting template or calendar link, but display it as availability. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. When I hit enter after / meeting, you'll notice that that same list of calendar links appears. So let's do that discovery call again. And then it's going to ask me for the number of meetings or tiles to display. I think any multiple of 4 works best. I typically do 12. And now you can see that I've got this really nice availability view. I didn't even have to drag and drop. It'll respect all of the settings of the calendar link. And it's just a really quick way to get your availability out to a client. Now, if you find yourself going through here and creating this calendar button a lot or doing something very repetitive, like saying the same thing over and over again, that's when I recommend utilizing MixMax templates. And templates are just saved snippets of text. They can be as long or as short as you want them to be. You can add as many as you want to within the compose window. And you can, of course, share them across your team so that you guys are standardizing your output or your outreach, I should say. And of course, you guys aren't spending time creating the same content if someone else has already done that work. Now, if you're just joining a team and maybe there's content already built out, you can select this templates button to check out all of the folders you have access to. So maybe I'll just check out my sales folder here. And if you actually know the name of the template that you want to use, our shortcut for templates and sequences is just a semicolon. And then you can just start to type for the name of the template you want. Hit enter, and it'll automatically add it here. And you can still make changes to templates once they're in a compose window, of course. So if there's something you want to edit, or maybe you want to add a calendar link, you can, of course, do that here. Now, you'll notice with this particular template or these templates, I should say, that I've added here, there are a lot of enhancements that we have. So by default, we will generate previews of PDFs and URLs. You can also generate previews of YouTube videos. We work with Yarn, Vidyard, Jiffy or Giphy, depending on your pronunciation there. I know it can get contentious. And you can access all of these just again by hitting that endpoint or using the / command. One enhancement that I really love, or I guess 2, are yes/no questions and also our polls. Because of course, people do have buttons, like I said, and it's a really good way to get that client feedback. But if you're on growth or enterprise, you can also set up automation that says, hey, if somebody answers my poll with this response, then I want to automatically drop them into this sequence or send them this follow-up email. So not only are you getting more data about potential clients or even existing ones, of course, but you can set up automation so that you're having to do less manual touches. And I absolutely use these in every single one of my sequences that I send. We do, we don't have an integration directly with, I might mess this up, BombBomb. I actually haven't heard of that before. We do have like very limited HTML, and I say limited because Gmail's obviously a little bit more strict there than a typical like email marketing provider might be. So like a MailChimp, HubSpot, I know they all have pretty advanced HTML options. But if you are looking to embed, you could potentially use that. And the last thing I want to point out are these highlighted bracketed fields. So these are MixMax variables, and it's how you can actually pull in client information, either from your contacts in MixMax and Google, or your CRM like Salesforce and Pipedrive, so that even templated emails have that personal feel. And I want to point out too, it's less obvious, but I actually also use variables in my meeting template titles so that I'm pulling in my client's name whenever I meet with them. Now, once I actually add a recipient here, so I'll go ahead and just add myself, you'll notice that all of those variables go away. We're pulling in this recipient's information from Salesforce. And one thing that's very handy about that as well is, let's say you use a template that's pulling from Salesforce, but the recipient doesn't actually exist in Salesforce yet. We'll actually give you a little warning message saying like, hey, we can't find it. Like, make sure that you resolve these variables before you send. And that just ensures that you're never going to send something blank or wonky to a recipient, right? And the last templates functionality that I think is so critical, especially for teams who are maybe just getting up and running or who really want to push adoption. If I hit that templates button all the way down at the bottom, there's an option to save this message as a template. And so if you find yourself writing something that you use all the time, or if it's like great objection handling and you want to share it for the team and have it for later, I highly recommend utilizing this option. And it prevents you from having to waste time in the future by like going into your sent box or sent folder, or having to search your inbox, copy and pasting, and then going into MixMax. And the last option in our toolbar that I want to touch on are sequences. So sequences with MixMax or sequences in general are also kind of known by cadences, campaigns, drip campaigns, mail merge. I've kind of heard it all at this point, but it's really just a way to have those automatic touches with the client, depending on how they interact with prior ones. And in general, I see people add a bulk list of recipients to a sequence. But if you're ever in a situation where you just want to drop someone into a sequence as a one-off, maybe you've got a great like post-demo follow-up sequence that you have, you can do that right here using the same flow that we saw with templates. So I can select that here, maybe go into a folder and find the one that I want. If I have any variables throughout the sequence, we do ask you to confirm. And now I can see that, hey, if Jane does not respond to my sequence webinar kickoff call by next Thursday, August 26th, then we're going to go ahead and start the second stage. Last couple of things here. So at the bottom, we do also have some enhancements as well. I forget who it was, I apologize, who asked about tracking, but I do want to point out that if you hover over the tracking indicator at the bottom of your compose window, you can toggle your default tracking. So if you have clickable content or maybe something that they can download and you want to see that activity, of course, you can turn this on. And this is not changing your default tracking settings. It's just a one-off situation. If this is maybe a high-level client or you've got like a contract out and you want to get alerted in real time when people start to interact with this message, you can turn on these desktop notifications. And for those of you who I believe this is available on Growth and Above, I apologize, I'm not totally sure for smart email notifications, but you can even turn on what we call smart email and smart Slack notifications. And what these do is they'll actually send you an alert, obviously either via email or Slack, whenever one of your recipients opens your message 3 or more times. I don't love this for CS folks because I think it's pretty noisy. We have really, in general, like pretty high open rates. I will almost only use this if I've got someone who's tough to get a hold of, has statistically gone dark, and then this gives me a really good indication of when they're interested. I see this feature most commonly used for like our SDR teams or maybe AEs who are doing a lot of outbounding. And to the left of that tracking indicator, you'll see this send later functionality now. So just like with our reminders, hey, maybe I got an out of office message from someone. I still want to create the email and send it, but I want to wait until they're back. Or maybe if they're just in a really different time zone and I want to be mindful of that, you can of course schedule this to go out later. So maybe I want to send it, next Tuesday at, let's say 10 a.m. and maybe they're in Europe, which would be 3 a.m. my time. And as you start to work with clients and you have that back and forth tracked activity, you'll notice that something called recommended send times start to populate. And this is saying, based off of that past tracked activity, this is when we think they're most likely to be actively in their inbox. So I'm kind of calling myself out here, but it looks like I will be most actively in my inbox today at 12:03. Go ahead and schedule that email, and then we're good to go. Now, if you're like me and you maybe have like a send later or some sort of future automation that you want to edit before it goes out, or maybe if you get an out of office message from someone and you just want to check to see if you have any messages going out to them while they're away, you can actually do that directly in your inbox if you are on the growth and enterprise plan. And to do that, you'll just want to go into your sidebar and navigate to this middle tab called People. And you can look up your recipients here. One thing I should point out that's also very handy is you don't necessarily have to type their email. If you hover over someone's email address in your inbox list view, we'll actually update that search. And so I can see here for Jane at MixMax.com in this history tab, I'll see all of our past events, but more importantly, in this purple outbox section, I can see any future automation. So if I got an out of office message from Jane and I have a message going out to her today at 12 and I want to reschedule it, I can select it from my inbox view in that sidebar. It'll take me directly to it within MixMax in what we call the outbox. And I can completely stop it, reschedule, or if I still want it to go out, I can just make quick edits to it by hitting view here. I'm going to go ahead and stop that because I don't want that in my inbox. But it's pretty easy to update all of that here. And you can see that also works for sequences as well as your reminders. In this very left-hand tab, again, this is going to be a live feed, but it'll just be specific to this one recipient. If you're using Salesforce and you're in Growth or Enterprise, you can connect our direct integration. And not only can I see all of Jane's information in Salesforce, but I can also edit this. And if I do want to just quickly find them within Salesforce, one thing that I really use all of the time is this open in Salesforce button instead of having to go into Salesforce and then do a search for this client. You'll notice you can also log like events. So if you had an in-person meeting and it wasn't on your calendar and you want to make sure you log it, you can do that here. And using our shortcuts button, you can even log phone calls if you're on Enterprise. You can even create net new contacts, leads, accounts, anything like that. And the last thing I want to point out is this task section over here. Tasks are available on our enterprise plan only. And we do have a bidirectional sync again with Salesforce, and that includes tasks. So anything you create there, we can pull in and vice versa. And we do have a lot of different tasks like manual email tasks, a call task as well. And you can see this is a call task right here. So it's part of a webinar sequence that I have, and I need to reach out to Grace. I can see it's associated with Grace's contact record within Salesforce. It looks like we don't have a number for them. But if I add a number here, I can go ahead and give them a call, just hitting this call button. We do have a direct integration with Dialpad in case there's anyone listening who uses Dialpad as well. And let's say maybe I just want to exit this person from the sequence. I can do that here and then move on to my next task as well. Okay, so we're a little bit over halfway here, so I want to make sure we dive into the web app. And if you're following along at all, you can of course access that just by hitting this larger M at the top right-hand corner. By default, this will take you to an expanded version of our live feed, or what we were able to access in that sidebar. And this is really great for any of my managers out here or people who are part of a team, because you can not only see your own information, you can see what your live feed activity is for your entire team. You can even come here and filter activity. So maybe I just want to see how my sequences are performing and what the activity is there. And I can even save my searches. So if I find myself doing this a lot, I can save it. And I believe that's on Growth and Above. And I can also share it with my colleagues. Really quickly, I do want to point out the settings section down here. So if you are actively using MixMax and you want to change your reminders, tracking, even set up like your integrations, that's all going to be done in settings. But let's go ahead and move into our meeting templates, which as a refresher are how you create those evergreen or rolling calendar links. There's no limit to how many you can create. If you are using Zoom, I of course recommend going to that settings section, integrations, and integrating Zoom. I'm going to select new template here. Make sure you add a title here, and all of your asset titles in MixMax, regardless of what you're creating, are completely internal. So as you build your content, I really recommend thinking about some sort of naming convention that works for you, so that these are all easily searchable when you go to email a client. Let's say this is maybe my kickoff call with Grace Hopper, my coworker. And then I'll put, maybe this is for enterprise clients. Everything else, of course, is going to be or has the potential to be client facing. So be mindful as you move forward. In that title, like we saw earlier, I want to make sure I use MixMax variables to pull in that client information. So I'll do MixMax with, and you can use this button obviously over here, but again, I'm lazy. So I'll do curly bracket, curly bracket. And if I want to pull from MixMax or Google Contacts, you'll notice that these variables are all lowercase. I personally always try to pull from Salesforce. It's definitely our source of truth here. So those will have capital letters at the beginning of each word. And obviously Salesforce and of course Pipedrive have a ton of custom fields that you may be using. So if you need to search, you can start to type, and that will narrow down the fields that we're displaying. I want to pull in their company name, so I'll use the Salesforce account name field. And once I select that variable, you'll notice that it's asking for a fallback. And this is just insurance that says, you know, if you are emailing someone who isn't in Salesforce yet, or they're not associated with an account, what should we put so that this isn't a weird blank field? I'm sure we've all gotten those marketing emails that are like high space comma because they don't know who you are. That's what we really want to avoid here. So maybe I'll do like your, and then we can do kickoff. Never know if that's one word or two, kickoff call. I pretty much exclusively use Zoom or Hangouts. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on this Zoom call. If you're scheduling on behalf of someone and they've shared their Google Calendar with you, you can add their calendar here. You can add those custom fields, customize the page title, even change the URL right here. By default, we should have you available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, in whatever time zone your Google Calendar is in. You can, of course, change this. So if you're like me and you just want an hour to look at weekend emails on Mondays, set that time to 10. And frankly, no one shows up to my calls past like 2 p.m. on Fridays because I am on the West Coast here. So I usually cap those calls then. You can even create segments throughout your day if you're interested, just by hitting that plus button. Now down here in our options, we have a few things I really want to highlight. So the first obviously is offer times. Because this is a rolling calendar, it's just saying how soon and how far in the future should people be able to book time with you. I like a day to prepare, especially in CS, because I want to make sure that I'm looking at any relevant notes. If it's a training session, I've had time to like set up my demo account, that kind of a thing. If you're part of a team, like usually my sales teams like to have same day meetings or support teams, just change that 1 down to a 0. Maybe this is an hour long. I'll change the duration to 60 minutes. I always offer my time slots every 15 versus every 30, just to give people that flexibility when booking. And for longer events or maybe events with my key accounts, I'll always add a buffer time, typically of about 15 minutes. And that ensures that I have 15 minutes both before and after this meeting so I can prepare and, of course, follow up with notes or even give them some time to go over. I always leave this link to email thread on because what it actually does is adds a link to your actual email conversation in the event description in your Google Calendar. Super handy if you're like me and you have a lot of meetings with a lot of different people daily. I can quickly just reference the event, find my conversation, and I know right away what this is about. I love this functionality. I think it's not as widely used as it should be, but it's very, very handy for those of us who are on calls a lot. Again, you can turn off guest modifying meeting invites. And down here in prevent double booking and default guests is where you can, of course, make sure that the times you're displaying not only work for you, but also work for any required coworkers. So since this is my kickoff call with Grace, I'm going to actually add Grace in this default guest section first. That's going to, as you can see, add Grace as an attendee here. We're going to make her required. And because I have the Google Calendar permission set to make changes to events, I can also prevent double booking on Grace's calendar as well. And that just ensures that the only times the client sees, the only times they can book, will work for both myself and my coworker. And the last thing here is our automation. If you are in sales or any sort of situation where you might have a higher rate of people not showing up, I highly recommend using this automation functionality. It's just a reminder email that goes out at some time before your event that lets the client know, as you can see, like, hey, we have this meeting coming up. Here are all the details, and it's at this time. I don't generally change this copy. I think it's pretty perfect for what it's intended to do. If you are a same-day meeting person, you could say, maybe I want to send this out 1 hour before. And one thing that I've seen a couple teams use very successfully, especially if they do have a high rate of no-shows, or now I'm actually seeing it for companies that are having in-person meetings and they maybe have like COVID regulations, they'll add like a yes/no question here. So I'm going to do that /YN to get to my yes/no questions. Maybe I just want to confirm attendance. You still able to attend? Let's get rid of maybe, because who is that helping? Yep, you can change these answer. No, let's reschedule. Insert question. And that way you have clarity beforehand that, hey, this person is still planning to attend. And like I mentioned earlier, you can then set up automation using our rules. So if someone says, no, let's reschedule, great. Let's set up a rule that says, I'm going to follow up with them with this particular email template or this sequence that includes my meeting template so that they can reschedule immediately. Go ahead and save my changes, save this right here. You can send yourself a test message if you want to check it out beforehand. And if you want to just look at your calendar link, if you hit share your link right here, you can obviously copy it. Or if you're planning on creating a landing page or something like that to house all your calendar options, we do also offer this embed code. Okay, so let's move on into our templates. One thing that you may want to do, and you can see I do this a lot, is actually use a template, which again is just saved snippets of text. You could save those meeting templates as a calendar button. So I'm going to go into my personal folder and hit create new template. We do require a name for all templates and sequences to avoid, of course, having a bunch of untitled templates. And again, your client won't see this name, so be really specific. I'm going to say this is part of the webinar, and this is maybe like my 1 hour kickoff call calendar button with Grace. Save it in this personal folder here. And then you don't even need to have a subject. It can literally just be the calendar button. So I'll do that /CTA. You can also do /button. Add in the URL, save it, and we're good to go. And I know a lot of you or a lot of our users are really interested in creating sequences. I know it's kind of a pain to get set up, but I always recommend creating all of your messages or sequence messages as a template first. Not only do you get really good individualized reporting on a per template basis, but if in the future you want to use a sequence email as a one-off email to a client, or if you want to pull in different sequence emails and create a different sequence, it's obviously going to be a lot easier on you if they're already saved as templates. And so whenever you're ready to create a new folder, and I'm a big folder person, I would create a folder honestly for like every new initiative or every new sequence I was going to create. But just hit that plus button next to my folders or hit this new folder button here. And then we can add a name. So maybe this is my like inbound lead sequence. And this is for, if you can believe it, we're already in Q3 of 2021. Now, whenever you create a new folder, this will be private to you until you explicitly share it. So if you're someone like from a marketing team or you're a manager and you're in charge of creating content, you can keep all of your drafts in here before sharing it with your team. But whenever you're ready and you do want to share it, you can of course hit this share this folder option up here. And you can share either with individuals directly. So if you're working with a coworker to create content, you could add them here. And I'm going to give them edit access. And then maybe I want to share with like my sales team, but I just want to give them view access. And that way my buddy Grace, who's working on this with me, can come in and she can make any changes she wants to the templates here. But I know that my sales team, they can use the templates, they can even clone them and make changes to the clone. But I know that the original copy that we've created is not going to be changed by anyone but me and my coworker Grace. Done. And now any templates I create in this folder will respect those same settings, unless I explicitly change it for one of the templates in here. Sure, I'm saving this in this folder. And maybe this is, can't ever spell. I'll put stage 1. And that way when I go to create my sequence later, I know that this template is specifically for the first stage. And you can also use variables in your subject. In fact, I recommend it, especially again for sales teams, because this actually does help a lot with deliverability and ensuring that your messages are actually going to make it to your intended recipient. So I'll go ahead and pull in that first name. And then we'll do a fallback of friend or something, I don't know. And then add a little exclamation mark there. Obviously, I'm not a copywriter. And then you can just start to type. So we'll do, hi, first name, follow back with there, maybe throw in a little emoji. And this is really in the weeds and I'm not going to show you today, but we also have a feature called liquid markup where you can actually change the text of your template depending on the variable you're pulling in. So one that I see pretty commonly is like, hey, if I'm a recruiter and I'm reaching out to somebody and I know what company they work at, I want to say like, how are things going at X company? And if I'm a recruiter and I actually we're not able to pull in that variable information, I can't find where they work, I could make it less specific to their company and see, hey, I think I've got a role that you're interested in. I also see sales teams and CS teams do this for different job titles or roles within Salesforce. So they may want to adjust their messaging a little bit depending on if they're reaching out to a C-level executive or an individual contributor. Your team are great. Let's go ahead and maybe throw in a little poll. Now, of course, I'm getting more information about our new client. Again, we can set up that automation. And then maybe because we're fun, let's throw in a little GIF or GIF. Who wouldn't respond to this? And one thing I want to point out too is you can actually use variables for senders as well. So if you're creating this on behalf of the team, you can pull in the sender's calendar information, you can pull in their first name, their signature, their full name, all using our variables. So I'm going to throw in the sender first name, and that way my team has even less manual work to do when they want to go and use these. Now, templates are pretty straightforward and we're coming up at the end of the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and move into our sequences. And I'm also going to skip this sequence folder flow because it's identical to what we saw with our templates. I'm going to go ahead and create a new sequence here. Do it in my sequence folder. Why not? Create that here. And I think this flow honestly is a little bit backwards if it's your first time creating a sequence with MixMax. You can see that we're asking you to add recipients, but I never add recipients until I have all of my content, all of my stages built out. So let's go ahead and navigate to step 2 just by selecting edit stages at the top. And if you are on enterprise, you can change what you want to do here, but for growth and below, we'll just be sending automatic emails. And let's go ahead and maybe throw in that template we just created. So I found it just using that semicolon. That's why having a naming convention is so important. And even if I'm an individual contributor, I don't have edit access to that particular template. Once it's in the sequence or content that I'm creating, I can make any edits I want. So I could come in here and add my specific calendar link, or maybe make it more personal to me. Now let's say that I want to add another stage here. So if this person doesn't respond in 3 weekdays, and you can change this logic, although not replied is by far the most popular, I want to go ahead and send them another automatic email, and I want it to be as a reply to the same thread. And we'll just throw in another email here. Let's do my second nurturing email. It's got that sweet shack animation going on. Who wouldn't respond at this point? And then, of course, you can keep building this out. I think one thing that prevents a lot of teams from utilizing sequences, especially my CS and support folks, is the thought that they maybe have to be like 10 stages. And that's really not the case. I use a lot of one-stage sequences if I need to maybe promote a new feature, or we're trying to get product feedback and I want to just reach out to all of my decision makers at once. It's a one-stage sequence, and it's a lot easier to add all of my recipients using a sequence flow versus trying to obviously email them individually. That being said, a lot of people will create multi-stage sequences. I obviously have a couple around like QBRs and renewals, so you can add as many stages as you want here. I usually, because obviously I have enterprise access, I will start most of my sequences with a manual email task, which gives me the opportunity to just double check everything looks good before I send it. And the reason I need to check it before I send it is because most of my sequences are actually initiated based off of fields in Salesforce. So for example, if a renewal date or a subscription start date is 90 days away, I want this sequence to automatically start for me, so I'm not pulling reports and monitoring that constantly in Salesforce. And then because of course it is a renewal sequence and we want to make sure what we're quoting people is accurate, the email task gives me the ability just to confirm seat count looks good, pricing looks good, and I can send it. I'll usually also end those sequences with a to-do task, or maybe even bake in some call tasks, because if someone's not answering me and they're up for renewal, that's obviously a big deal. Now I added a to-do task here. So I'm going to say if they don't reply in another like 5 weekdays, I want a to-do task to be generated for me. And I want that task not only like to be generated in 5 days, I also want it to be due on that same day. So I usually change the due date down to 0. And in this sequence description, or in this task description, I should say, you could put in variables that will help you complete this. So you could say, like email from this account hasn't responded, like, I don't know, escalate or something like that. And you could even assign this to someone else. So if I wanted to assign this to like my boss, because at this point I want him to be aware, you could assign these tasks by default to someone specific at your company. And now when I go back into add recipients here, and another reason why I say create your content first is we'll actually ask for all of those variables as column headers right here. Whereas before we were only asking for email address. And even if you're using those fallbacks, because you want to be very personal, typically when you're using a tool like MixMax and sending through Gmail, this is just an additional layer to make sure what you're sending people feels very personal. One thing to note here as well, if you do want to add additional columns and they're maybe not part of your variable list, so you could like add a unique CC'd recipient for each email address here, you can do that just by hitting this plus button. But I'll get rid of that for now. And you can, of course, upload a CSV. That's definitely the most popular way that I see people add recipients here. If you go that route, please make sure that your column headers exactly match, including punctuation, capitalization, anything like that, what you see here. For those of you who are in growth and enterprise and are also using Salesforce, I think the easiest flow, and you can do this also in Salesforce, is to actually just import a list. So whether it's a contact list, lead list, you can even create custom reports so long as it has an email column. You can pull that in right here. So maybe I just want to pull in all of my recently viewed contacts. I'll go ahead and import all of those different fields. If people have unsubscribed, we remove them for you. We also remove duplicates. And you can see for all of these totally real emails, I actually don't have their first name at all. So I'm going to go through and just name them Home Jane. Maybe they all also work at MixMax. And then let's go ahead and edit our stages. So if I'm in this all recipients section, I can still customize for every recipient as a whole. And what's really good about this part of the flow is that it won't actually change the original copy of the sequence. It will only be for this batch of recipients. What's even more handy from this list view is the personalization and how easy it is to actually customize text, send times for specific recipients. So if I know Grace Hopper well, we've had a relationship in the past and they're now interested in MixMax, I could maybe add a personal note. So it's great to connect with you again. How's your puppy? I don't know. And you can also say, hey, we're friends on Instagram or whatever. I know that Grace is